Hello, if you don't know me, my name is Connor. My pronouns are he, him, and his. What you're about to watch is essentially a pre-recorded version of a post-screening Q&A for a little film I made called Our Transition. The film is a 9-minute short. It has been a passion project of mine and a piece I'm incredibly proud of. In it, I tell the story of my transition as a youth. I came out around 12, 13 years old, through the perspective of my parents. Over the past year and a half, the film has kind of gotten a life of its own and gone on to a lot of festivals, which I truly did not expect and have been incredibly grateful for. But it has always been meant for YouTube. YouTube was the place where I first learned what the word trans meant. It's where I found an online trans community. The goal of this film has always been to replicate some of the love and support that I experienced when I first came out, and to hopefully create a resource for other queer youth, other allies to turn to. So if you haven't watched the film yet, it's up. Go watch it, and I hope you learned something. I hope you gained something. I hope you feel good after watching it. And if you want to know more, stick around for this Q&A where my parents and I are going to talk about whatever isn't covered in the film. We're going to share some resources. We're going to share some stories. My parents are going to talk about what it was like being in front of the camera. And I hope you enjoy.
Oh, did Simba go in there? Are you sure Simba's not? Oh, hi, buddy. You want to come up?
So for starters, I thought just for fun, like you guys don't really talk about yourself much in the film because it's about transition, it's about this process. So I thought it might be fun if you guys wanted to share, obviously, your names, your pronouns, and then just like what do you do? What's going on in your life besides your kid?
Pete O'Keefe, he, him. I work in the nonprofit sector. I kind of have a passion for a really weird niche, which is not throwing away things or repurposing construction materials. So I manage 2 Habitat for Humanity restores where the dollars are running really a thrift store in 2 locations, help build homes in the local community.
Amy Siebert O'Keefe, she, her pronouns. I am an audiologist and have been a practicing audiologist for 34 years, which means obviously I like it and I enjoy helping people. I've been at the medical clinic I've been at for 16 years and work with a great group of coworkers who we've been through a challenging time, not as much of a challenging time as the frontline emergency care, healthcare providers, but still seeing an elderly population, a lot of who are very vulnerable and appreciative of hearing services, and people at this point really struggling with hearing due to the masks and everything else. So, but it's good, it's rewarding, it's fulfilling, and I have some great relationships with both my coworkers and my patients.
What was it like being filmed and getting to kind of like recount this story together? Was there anything either during the interview or just during the screenings that you got to kind of reflect on differently?
The one question I still remember getting from one of the film festivals that you weren't at, it was in northern Minnesota. Did you know when you were talking to your son and he was filming that it would end up in a documentary being screened like this? And I think that was the first time I saw us on this, big movie screen. And I was like, no, I think I would have dressed a little bit differently if I had known that my big face was going to be on the movie screen. And, because at the time when you were doing it, it's like, okay, this is a pet project. I mean, you've been filming stuff since you were little. So to have you sit down and talk to us, it was kind of like no big deal because we've done it before. As far as the neighborhood living in Minneapolis, having a very open, LGBT friendly community, being so welcoming, and that's our family. That's our neighborhood is kind of our family, and it was our family when you were growing up. So that made the transition, the resources close by at the university. I mean, if we didn't have those, who knows how well the process would have went.
Having the experience of watching it for me was not that I was looking left and right, but understanding that there could be someone else viewing this and what they're getting out of it is seeing someone else's journey, or a family, a group of three, a family's journey. You know, I'm about to go through this journey with maybe my child who just said that they're gender nonconforming in some way. And in that early portion of either confusion or wanting to learn more knowledge, you get to observe another family. If that's affected 2 or 3 families, that's awesome. And for all you know, maybe it's affected many more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that segues into my next question really nicely, which is, were there any reactions from an audience member or like conversations you got to have after a screening that surprised you?
I remember, again, I think this is when it was at a film festival north of where we live, and it was on the big screen that someone walked up. I think it was that they had a brand new, a baby or a new child, and they just thought that this very short film showed the love of the family and the support of the family amongst the 3 people. And I thought, oh, well, that's really nice to hear.
1 or 2 moms, can I give you a hug? You know, was the comment of some of the parents there. I think appreciating the how a family can make it through a journey like this and be absolutely fine, and how important the support of a supportive family is huge.
Is there anything you want to share about the experience of raising a trans kid through high school, or even through high school and into college, that wasn't touched on in the film?
Finding the right school for your child. Now it's, you know, all these kids are at home now, but some had resorted in the past to homeschooling due to bullying. I think for you, high school was much more opening than maybe we thought it would be. Having a great group of friends, especially involved in theater. But when you think of middle school, elementary school, you know, it's hard to know where is your kid going to fit in, and finding the appropriate school, having support of the family, having support of friends. It's much different now than it was 11 or 12 years ago when people didn't know about it, and would be much harder. And now there's much more support, whether it's, again, through schools, through legal avenues, through other things. You've got to have the support, and you have to support your child. And they need to have friends who are supportive of them. And that's a tough thing.
You know, every family is different and everybody has a different process, but it might be helpful for some people to hear. We'll focus on, let's say, like the high school decision process. At the time, what were some of the things you wanted checked off in terms of finding that safe environment? Was there a point where you felt like, oh, okay, I feel really good about this school. Like, this is what I wanted to hear, and now I feel comfortable sending my kid here?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about at that time, maybe not today, but at that time, in a larger community where there were multiple school choices for high school. Keep in mind, most of the country, it's like there's one choice of your school, maybe 2. At the time that you were diving into high school, the public school system, I think, was really geared towards the equitable aspect of a trans child, because their prism was they had already kind of gone down the road of there are gay and lesbian children, and how do we support them, and how do we make them equal? So I think there was a big push on equality. The fact that we moved and chose a private school, that specific private school simply had an ethos about it of we care for each child individually, and that flowed so wonderfully that it answered the question itself, that you would have a good experience.
I expect almost all schools, at least in Minnesota right now, I can't say about other states down south, but have some kind of protocol. They
Exactly.
have it.
Exactly.
Right, didn't have 10, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like as a parent, you have every right to know what that protocol is and how it works.
And there is help. There is help from lawyers that aren't going to charge you. There's help from advocacy groups to help you navigate that stuff, which was not around in the past.
Well, and here's a comment about school, because whether it's grade school, middle school, high school, college, every kid through that several years at that institution is sort of finding their voice.
Well, yeah, it's a very tough age.
They're gaining confidence, hopefully. They're creating a social network that might just be one best friend, or it might expand. And I thought your high school experience started out, not unsurprisingly, in ninth grade with you fairly quiet and introspective. But by the time you snap your fingers and now you're a graduating senior, very confident individual, wonderful network of friends. Mm-hmm. Any parent who's about to have their lesbian child, their transgender child, their gay son, worrying about them going into middle school, worrying about them going into high school, a new situation. I think your experience was a positive note, or at least I reflect on it. Mm. And it was a positive thing to see that growth.
Like I mentioned, I'll have links kind of below and compile resources, but are there any resources that you want to reference, that you want to mention?
I have to speak more specifically for Minnesota, which is, if someone asked me today, I have a child, whatever age, transforming families, which now they meet virtually. They all used to meet once a month at a facility, and you'd have the little ones, from young to all the way up to 18, who would then, have their breakout groups. There's also legal help through Outfront Minnesota. If you feel like you're, not being represented, if you're looking on how to find a name, how to do a name change, how to change all the stuff you have to change when your child transitions, they have links all over their website, Outfront Minnesota. For me, there's Facebook pages, a parent of a transgender child, parent of a transgender son. People shoot out questions all the time about, I'm in such and such a state, anybody know this? Or I'm in, this county of Minnesota, does anyone know any therapists up here? People are throwing out their advice and recommendations, which is awesome.
We benefited from driving to a facility that had probably nationally, one of the first group settings. So here are 6 or 9 families, or at least the support person of the child. Let's meet together in a circle and talk through some of these basics. That to me was hugely therapeutic. The two of us were tracking a little differently also. So where are you on that path? And it was very helpful. Kind of interesting that, back then there was really hardly any such thing as a Zoom meeting. Right. From this point forward, there's probably a wonderful opportunity for families or to be able to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say group therapy was one of the things that I think gets mentioned in the film, but kind of slips through the cracks. That was right. That I feel like we talk about it every single screening because it was such an anchor to our experience.
It's peer support, maybe for you, I would say, in whether it's a kid's peer support or an adult peer support. You want to be there for your kid, but you also need to know from other parents am I doing the right thing? Tell me your story, because you're so far along on this. How did it go? Here's what we're trying. What do you think? I mean, that's huge.
That was it for my questions. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about?
Just off the top of my head, I think as a parent, whatever age your child is listening to your child. They sometimes can describe how they're feeling. Other times they don't know how they're feeling. And it comes out and they're not sure how to express it to you depending on their age. So listening to your kiddo and letting them do what makes them happy, do what makes them feel comfortable, supporting your child, loving your child, and that it's difficult. Let's say you have parents that are not together and one supports and one doesn't support. Yeah. I mean, what a nightmare that was. Or family members. And if family members choose not to support your child, well, then you don't need to expose your child to those family members anymore, because that's hurtful, and it's our job to protect our kids when they're younger. Yeah. Your child comes first. That's the priority. So that's huge for the child to know that you have their back and that you're there to support them. and you can't shelter them from everything, but you can shelter them from and protect them from obvious threats. And if family members are those threats, then those family members don't need to be part of your life until they can accept your child for who they are.
I think of my tip for any parent is your 10, 12, or 14-year-old is they pick up on everything besides that parent supporting the child. The other interactions, like walking down in the neighborhood or going to the family get together, are just hugely impactful.
Right.
And try to realize that a little phone conversation that you're having where you think your kid is in the other room not listening, it's a big deal what you're saying to someone who's on the other line, because and that would either really make that child to be beaming and confident that I've got my parents' back, or not, and be cognizant of every moment, because they're all important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll second that. With you guys did a really good job of, I think this is kind of talked through in the film, but I came out and you both had the responsibility and the confidence to, Mom, you went to your parents and kind of did some of the talking for me, and Dad, you went around the neighborhood and did a lot of the talking for me. And having that confidence to say, my kid identifies in this way, whatever that might be, and I feel confident enough to deliver this narrative for them in a way that is true to them, and in a way that, just like you're saying, you kind of can lead the energy into a space.
Yeah.
So you can make something like a neighborhood barbecue, which after a kid's maybe just come out or is kind of still figuring things out, can be really stressful because our world is coded with gender. But if you kind of bring the right energy into the space and the knowledge into the space, you can make that a much safer environment and a really positive experience. Like, we got to spend what I think can, not to stereotype, but can often be a tumultuous time, which is any kid's teen years. And we got to spend a lot of that together, going to things like group therapy and kind of, for lack of a better term, or a better way of describing it, turning my transition into this sort of like group project that the three of us got to work on, which might not be a system that works well for everybody, but to some degree, we got to collaborate in that.
Yeah, I think a good way to describe it, I think I've used the term journey. We started our journey when you were 11, and it is a journey, and it can be positive, negative. It can have valleys and troughs and hills and whatever to climb, but it's a journey.